Welcome to our monthly Charter School Investor Podcast, What Charter School Leadership Looks Like. I'm Alan Wallstetter, founder and president of School Improvement Partnership, which supports high-quality public charter schools around the country. We report on over $2 billion of charter school bonds for the financial markets and accurately track operating, academic, and financial data on every charter school and CMO in 34 states and the District of Columbia. The School Improvement Partnership database pulls all of this data into a single easy-to-use dashboard with 100 data points, including finances, enrollment, real estate details, even authorizer updates. We also, importantly, produce this podcast. Every month, we meet with leaders in the charter school sector to get their perspective on how they fly the plane while it's still being built. Our guest today, Akiko Mitsui, director at Fitch Ratings. She's a national thought leader in charter school facilities financing. Akiko is passionate about what she terms double bottom line investing to foster both community development and meeting investors' financial objectives. Historically, after she graduated from Harvard Business School, she was a recipient of the New York City Mayor's Voluntary Action Award. Welcome to the podcast, Akiko.
Thank you, Alan. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak, and also for all the good work that you do at SIP. It's really been valuable to us as well as we work in the charter school sector.
Akiko, before we start, you had mentioned that you're just returning from your 25th reunion of your class at Harvard Business School. I have to tell you, I'm not sure we've ever had anybody in that class on the podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Thank you, Alan. You know, as I reflect upon the 25 years I've spent after getting my MBA, I recall very memorably the mission of the business school, which is to educate leaders that make a difference in the world. It's very simple: educate leaders who make a difference in the world. The way I chose to make a difference was to apply my financial analysis and credit skills to industries that are involved in the government or nonprofit organizations. I also applied my personal time to several nonprofit organizations, and that's how I chose to make a difference in this world. So it is also kind of fun to think about the charter school industry and how when I graduated from business school was about the time when the charter school industry really started to flourish. And so it's really a great closing of this circle to be here today to discuss charter school finance upon the 25th anniversary of my graduation from business school. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we're glad you chose that path. As you say that, it reminded me of something, Akiko, that during the pandemic, when you recall so many district schools and charter schools shut down, as did school for really 6 months. There's a group in California, charter school group. They were feeding 1 million people a month during the shutdown, and because that's what their community in Los Angeles needed. And it is that very that very connection, between community that can be a little bit of the secret sauce for charter schools at times. Well, thank you. I did want to, as I mentioned, just delve a little into the analysis about California school districts and charter schools and immigration, and get a few highlights from that research. I know that you touched on not only enrollment trends in California for K to 12, past and projected, as well as drivers in these enrollment trends, mostly demographics about declining birth rates, out migration, which I hadn't heard much about, not just for charter schools, but also for districts as well. So, can you share some of the details on that?
Sure. Um, we did a pretty in-depth analysis about enrollment trends at California K through 12 school districts and the impact of charter school enrollment over the last 10 years and projected going forward. And what we found really was that there has been a steady decline in enrollment in the public district schools, including charter schools in California over the past 10 years. And unfortunately, that enrollment decline is projected to continue going forward. This obviously has credit implications for both district schools and charter schools that are operating in California. When we dove down into the drivers of the enrollment trends, what we found is that the declines in public school district enrollment, although was somewhat impacted by the growth of charter schools during the period, was not really driven entirely by the charter school growth, nor was it really the majority of the reasons for the decline in public school attendance over that time period. Generally speaking, the demographics in California have been declining and unfortunately will continue to have a downward trend. Birth rates are at record lows, and outmigration is to other states and other countries, but also to, other states especially is particularly high and somewhat correlated to high housing costs in California relative to other states. And this is a trend that we're seeing not only in California, but other historically high growth states. And charter school enrollment has grown during this time. But once again, it's not necessarily a function of the charter school growth that the K through 12 enrollment has been declining.
Ah, interesting. But buried in that, it sounds like and California is not different from other places, and this actually happened post-pandemic. What you're saying is that while, unless I'm missing it, the data shows that there have been a number of factors that could trigger a decline in enrollment. It seems like it may have hit the districts a little harder than it may have public charter schools, perhaps, in the places that you've looked. But there are some factors that cut across, K to 12 education writ large, that you just pointed out.
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. Well, as you say that, your report also discusses immigration policies leading to higher absenteeism and potentially decreases in enrollment. How might this impact charter school finance?
Yeah, so we've all seen the stories on the news about federal immigration authorities picking up people in hospitals, churches, schools, transportation centers, and places of work. As you can imagine, immigrants and persons of color, despite their citizenship status, some of them are fully US citizens, they've seen these stories too. And many are foregoing in-person education and even medical care. In states such as California, where school funding is based on attendance counts, absenteeism will reduce their funding. However, it doesn't reduce the school's obligation to educate their enrolled students. Clearly, this mismatch can wreak havoc on an already tight budgets for public schools, including public charter schools. A secondary effect of immigration-related absenteeism is a function of the state funding formulas that provide for supplemental funding for certain students. In the case of California, the local control funding formula, for instance, provides supplemental funding to students who are English language learners, students in foster care, or students with learning disabilities. Assuming that much of the immigration-related absenteeism is concentrated among students who receive supplemental funding, the absenteeism has an even bigger impact potentially on school funding. I'd also like to point out another consideration, one that's not directly related to school finances, but which is learning loss. As school districts and colleges around the country are now seeing the evidence of pandemic era learning loss, especially among lower income and minority populations, I'm personally concerned about the long-term impact to our education system from an additional assault to consistent in-person learning among several students.
Very good point. You sound like an educator there. When you talk about the decrease in absenteeism and enrollment, I was just going to bring up on the share screen here, if I can, an excerpt from the School Improvement Partnership database, which shows the list of California charter schools. But in let's see, if you slide over a little bit to the right, you can see those are all financial metrics. And again, if they access the financial markets, we have their coverage and cash and all that. There's a column called enrollment decline. Let's look at that, which might be a little bit to the left the other way. And that has some highlights in it. And the enrollment decline, enrollment change. And again, this is a button on the database. You can see in red the schools that have had declines of enrollment of greater than 5% as you go down the entire list of charter schools. So there's quite a number. Thank you for sharing that. So with that, which is available on the School Improvement database, the question is, you hinted on it, when you talked, Akiko, about in a lot of different spots how there can be many factors to why this absenteeism is triggered, and enrollment. What we've seen, and to be honest, I'm working on it right now. There's a immigrant in the United States, 19 years, who I'm actually trying to get out. He was in court. Trying to clear up a parking ticket. ICE picked him up and sent him to detention for the last 3 months. And he is not in the country, legally. I mean, he overstayed his visa, but he's not a violent offender. He's none of that. So when people hear stories like that, when people are simply, in our case, picking up their students from school, and then there's the possibility of something like this, I wonder whether this potentially has an impact on absenteeism and enrollment.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely playing out in many schools. If you talk to school leaders around the country, they'll echo the same sentiments.
Mm. And with respect to your report, as you did your research, what are your expectations about how the immigration enforcement and charter school factors will ultimately play out in California?
Yeah, so speaking from a credit perspective, of course, although we're talking about general trends in the state of California, not every school district is created equal. And that's the beauty of credit analysis and being able to dive into some of the details. If you look at our research report, we actually have an interactive chart in the research report that highlights each California school district with high projected enrollment losses and marries that data with the school districts with high immigrant populations and supplemental funding and high charter school exposure. Um, Not all California school districts will be vulnerable to financial stress based on these factors. But if you do look through the interactive charts, you can see which school districts might be at most risk to the factors mentioned today.
I see. Yeah, that piece of the report and the interactive chart is actually unique and really makes it so that it's not it's a learning tool that doesn't sit on a shelf. It's actually something you want to keep open. Well, as you mentioned that, and you saw some of the data in the School Improvement Partnership database that we also track, it makes me realize that some of these factors, like I would say enrollment, just from our little perspective, it can be a little bit of what we would call a leading indicator of trouble ahead. In other
Mhm.
words, it doesn't mean things are going bad, but it means you may want to pay attention. And for a portfolio surveillance for an investor, it could be interesting to know that. But your report is, of course, a step ahead of all of us in that the Fitch report that you co-authored, and uh, it highlights that charters, schools' reserve levels, and ability to right-size staffing and facilities for a potential small school database can be important. Um, what should charter school leaders affected by federal immigration policy be doing now?
Thanks, Alan. I'm not really in a position to be advising charter school leaders. They've done such a great job navigating a variety of things historically that I don't know if I have the capacity to do myself. But I have seen and expect charter school leaders to continue to do the same things they're most familiar with, which is advocate for their students and communities with state government, local leaders, or others, innovate with personalized or alternative ways to reach students, and administrate effectively so that they can continue to educate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's, yeah, just as you say, consistent with what some of the best charter school leaders that we work with are doing. Well, as you say that, it makes me underline and sort of go to a different element that Fitch underlined when it updated its rating criteria for charter schools in November of 2025. I noticed that the guidance looks at board governance issues,
Mhm.
which in a broad way is really almost about leadership. Not only board governance, but how it works with the CEO, EO, and all that. So tell us a little the thinking behind that from your
Yeah,
perspective.
so let me back up a little bit and say we introduced new charter school criteria in November of 2025. And the motivation to update the the charter school criteria, which is the guideline that we use to rate the bonds in the charter school sector, is uh, threefold, perhaps. But the most important change in our charter school criteria is to reflect the charter school industry as it has matured over the years. So we recognize that there are many schools with long operating histories, with robust management and governance practices, with multiple locations, with solid academic performance. And while historically investors and the charter school industry and quite frankly our criteria was very skittish about charter school renewal prospects, always kind of on the edge as to whether or not an authorizer would revoke a charter. We know that now, in some circumstances, that's really not necessarily a risk factor, but more of a positive attribute to some of the charter school operators in the country. So the new criteria really reflects the industry as it has grown and developed and maybe in some sense matured over time. And there's two other elements that I think are fairly unique or new in this criteria. One is, as you mentioned, a focus on management and governance factors that will be actually explicitly assessed by a Fitch rating team when we rate a charter school. And Another factor that we've introduced is recognizing that in a lot of high yield in sectors, especially, the information and disclosure protocols, the covenants and protections for investors that may be embedded in security in a transaction are actually supportive of credit stabilization, especially when things may start to go downhill. So those three factors, kind of modernizing the criteria to reflect the industry as it's matured today, introducing management and governance factors as an explicit ratings evaluation criteria, and also introducing, bond provisions, the covenants and security and disclosure practices as a ratings consideration are three aspects of the criteria that we think make it unique.
Yeah, I think as we, I agree with everything you said, Akiko, 100%. The little log I would throw on that fire is that, given the dozens of charter schools that we actually work with on reporting every quarter, we've just simply noticed that there is more turnover with respect to leadership. And so
Mm-hmm.
therefore that emphasis on board governance, even potentially, having succession planning in place, particularly for
Mm-hmm.
those founders who, either don't want to really ever go, or maybe it's time to go. It's really hard. It's wonderful things to come to grips with when when your baby's all grown up. But it's really things that in the sector, I think we can be, just as Fitch has been in so many areas, a little more thoughtful to ask about board governance and see if that's part of their thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think board governance is I mean, not only board governance, but governance and management is inherently a difficult thing to try to measure. But I think we all know it when we see it in terms of good board governance and bad board governance. What we've tried to do in our criteria is outline a few of the types of factors that we would be looking at and are more measurable in terms of how we assess board governance and management structure. So for instance, in the best case, we'd like to see robust financial planning processes, measurable targets and goals, clearly tried to strategic goals as well, consistent performance within or above the budgeted expectations. This is financial performance. Financial and operating reports timely and complete, conform with the standard accounting practices, and a robust track record of implementing financial and operating goals. We kind of mentioned that before. And what's the composition of the board? The board with representatives from a variety of fields, or are they primarily local community board members with parents and local people who may or may not have the requisite experience with bond financing or finance in general or legal issues, et cetera. So succession planning is certainly an important factor in many institutions, not only for key management positions, but obviously the leader of a school is often the driver or the founder of a school, and certainly we view any huge concentration without a contingency plan as a risk.
Sure. Well, as you were mentioning, Akiko, the diversity of board representatives, it brought up this idea. Again, I was thinking that Fitch is positing of, the relationship of the charter school and the community it serves.
Yeah.
As you talk about, community leaders who are part of the board, it makes sure that, that's one of the lenses that the board has at the table. Just like it's important, as we know, to have somebody who understands finance and maybe somebody on the law side. It's important to have somebody who understands, the community and the relationship between the community and the charter school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Um,
all of these factors are actually laid out in our criteria document, which is a public document. So if that's something that uh, anyone would be interested in reading or reviewing, or even asking questions about, we'll be more than happy to discuss it with you.
Well, Akiko, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Now, if our readers want to read your full report from Fitch that you co-authored, please tell us how they can find it.
Oh, yes. It's fitchratings.com. The report we wrote in February about California school districts, charter schools, and immigration is available publicly on the Fitch website. I believe a link to the publication is provided as part of this podcast. Once again,
Thank you.
we'd be happy to discuss anything um, or follow up with anything regarding the criteria or the report or any other issues.
Well, thank you again, Akiko. By the way, if you don't already, please subscribe to Charter School Investor at www.schoolimprovementpartnership.net. Twice a month, you'll get one email that will let you know what's going on with charter schools around the country and actually highlight an excerpt from our monthly podcast, in this instance with Akiko. If you're interested in advertising in Charter School Investor or sponsoring the podcast, or even if you know a great charter school leader we should hear from, reach out to me, Alan, at schoolimprovementpartnership.net. Many thanks again to Akiko, and thanks to all of our listeners for tuning into this episode of What Charter School Leadership Looks Like. See you next month.